There is a moment, quiet, subtle, almost invisible, when someone stops valuing you. No announcement, no dramatic confrontation, just a shift in energy. Their tone changes, their attention fades. Your presence, once welcomed, becomes optional. And this is where most people make their greatest mistake. They chase, they try harder, they explain themselves. They fight desperately to regain the attention of the very person who has already decided they are no longer important. But understand this carefully. The moment someone stops valuing you is not just about them. It is a test of your power. The world operates on a brutal Machiavellian truth. People value what they fear losing, not what they already possess. When you are always available, you become ordinary. When you constantly explain yourself, you appear weak. When you beg for attention, you destroy your own leverage. And leverage is everything. Machiavelli understood something most people still fail to grasp today. Respect is never given to the needy. Respect is reserved for the unpredictable, the controlled, the emotionally sovereign. The man who does not chase approval becomes dangerous in the eyes of others, because he cannot be manipulated. So when someone stops valuing you, the worst thing you can do is fight for their attention. The powerful man does something far more unsettling. He withdraws his presence. Calmly, silently, completely. And suddenly the balance of power begins to shift. But before we go deeper, I want you to do something right now. Go to the comments and type this phrase, "My silence is my power." Let that statement sink into your mind, because once you understand the strategy I'm about to reveal, you will never beg for respect again. And the next time someone thinks you are easy to replace, they will learn a lesson they never expected. Number 1. The power of strategic disappearance. When someone stops valuing you, your instincts will try to betray you. Your mind will whisper dangerous ideas. Call them, text them, explain yourself, fix the situation before you lose them. But those instincts are the reflexes of someone who has been conditioned to seek approval. Machiavellian strategy demands something far colder, something far more powerful. When someone begins to take you for granted, you do not increase your presence, you remove it. This is the trick most people cannot execute, because it requires emotional discipline. Strategic disappearance is not childish silence. It is not passive aggression. It is controlled absence. The moment you sense that your value is being questioned, you quietly step back. You stop offering the attention they once received so easily. You stop explaining yourself. You stop chasing conversations. You become calm, polite, but distant. And that distance does something extraordinary inside the human mind. People are wired to notice loss far more than they appreciate presence. When you are always there, your value becomes invisible. But when your energy suddenly disappears, the mind begins searching for the reason. Doubt appears, curiosity grows, and slowly, the balance of attention begins to shift back toward you. This is the psychological mechanism Machiavelli understood centuries ago. Power is often created not through action, but through controlled absence. Weak men panic when they feel someone pulling away. Powerful men understand that silence is sometimes the most intimidating message you can send. When you disappear strategically, you communicate something without saying a single word. You are not dependent, and independence is one of the most magnetic forces in human psychology. The moment someone realizes you are not desperate for their validation, they begin to reevaluate your importance. But here is the critical part most people miss. Strategic disappearance only works if it is genuine. If you disappear while secretly obsessing, checking your phone every 5 minutes, waiting for their reaction, you are still trapped in their psychological frame. The power comes from emotional detachment. You withdraw your energy and redirect it toward your own life, your mission, your growth. In other words, you stop making them the center of your attention. The moment you do this, something fascinating begins to happen. The person who once ignored you suddenly becomes aware of the silence you left behind. They notice the missing attention. They feel the absence of your presence. And human psychology hates unanswered questions. People become curious. Sometimes they even become unsettled. Why did he stop reaching out? Why does he seem unaffected? What changed? That uncertainty creates tension. And tension restores value. Machiavelli believed that control often comes from understanding the fears hidden inside human nature. One of the deepest fears people carry is the fear of losing influence over someone they once controlled. When you withdraw calmly and without drama, you trigger that fear. Suddenly, they are no longer certain where they stand with you. And uncertainty is far more powerful than pleading. Now listen carefully, because this is where most people sabotage the strategy. The moment the other person begins showing interest again, the weak mind rushes back into the old dynamic. They flood the person with attention. They try to secure the connection again. And instantly, the power disappears. The person learns that they only need to pull away slightly to make you chase again. But a man who understands Machiavellian discipline does something different. He remains composed. He does not rush. He does not explain the silence. He allows the other person to feel the full weight of his emotional independence. Because respect is not created through explanations. Respect is created through behavior. And when someone sees that your attention is no longer automatic, they begin to treat it as something valuable again. Let me pause here for a moment, because I want this principle to sink into your mind. If you understand the power of controlled absence, type this in the comments right now. I control my attention. Those 4 words represent a shift in mindset that most people never achieve. Because the real currency of human relationships is not love, approval, or validation. The real currency is attention. Whoever controls their attention controls their power. Machiavelli wrote that men judge more by the eye than by the hand, because everyone can see appearances, but few truly understand reality. In modern terms, this means people react to what they perceive about your behavior. When they see that your attention is rare and selective, they instinctively assign it higher value. Scarcity creates importance. And this leads us to an uncomfortable truth about human nature. People often do not realize your worth until they experience the possibility of losing you. This is not cruelty. It is simply psychology. The human brain prioritizes potential loss much more strongly than steady presence. When something becomes uncertain, it suddenly becomes meaningful. Your silence introduces uncertainty. Your distance creates curiosity. Your independence restores respect. But strategic disappearance is only the beginning of the transformation. Because once you stop chasing validation, you begin to see people differently. You start noticing who truly values your presence and who only valued your attention when it was convenient. And that realization will change how you move through the world. There are people who will only respect you when you demonstrate that you can walk away without hesitation. Not with anger, not with bitterness, just quiet indifference. That kind of emotional control is extremely rare, and rare qualities always command attention. When someone realizes that you are capable of leaving the dynamic entirely, they begin to understand something powerful. Your presence is a choice, not a dependency. And that realization changes everything. Because the moment people understand that you are not afraid to lose them, they become afraid of losing you. Before we move into the next section, I want you to anchor this principle in your mind. Write this phrase in the comments: my absence reveals my value. Once you truly understand this concept, the way you respond to disrespect will change forever. You will stop arguing for your worth. You will stop negotiating for attention. And instead, you will allow silence, distance, and emotional discipline to speak for you. Number 2, the power of unpredictability. Once you master silence and controlled absence, the next level of power reveals itself. Unpredictability. Most people live in predictable emotional patterns. When they feel ignored, they react with frustration. When they feel rejected, they chase harder. When they feel uncertain, they demand reassurance. Their reactions are so predictable that anyone who pays attention can control them like a script that has already been written. But a man who understands Machiavellian psychology refuses to be predictable. He understands that the moment people can predict your emotional reactions, they begin to control the dynamic. Machiavelli believed that power often belongs to the person who keeps others guessing. Predictability creates comfort, and comfort reduces respect. But unpredictability introduces tension, curiosity, and caution. When someone cannot fully read your reactions, they become far more careful with how they treat you. Think about it. When people know exactly how you will respond, they stop respecting your boundaries. They know you will forgive quickly. They know you will return no matter how they behave. They know your loyalty has no conditions. And when loyalty becomes unconditional in the wrong environment, it slowly becomes invisible. But unpredictability breaks that pattern. When someone cannot easily predict how you will react, they begin to pay closer attention. Your silence becomes louder. Your presence becomes more significant. Your behavior begins to carry weight. The key here is not emotional chaos. Unpredictability is not about becoming irrational or dramatic. It is about becoming emotionally controlled in ways that people cannot easily manipulate. For example, when someone expects you to chase, you remain calm and distant. When someone expects you to react emotionally, you respond with composure. When someone tries to provoke you, you refuse to give them the reaction they want. This creates a powerful psychological shift. The person who once believed they understood you suddenly realizes they do not. And that uncertainty changes the balance of power. Human beings are deeply uncomfortable with things they cannot easily predict. When someone cannot read your next move, they become cautious. They become curious. Sometimes they even become slightly intimidated, because unpredictability suggests independence, and independence signals strength. This is why Machiavellian strategy is not about cruelty or manipulation for its own sake. It is about understanding the hidden mechanics of human behavior. People naturally test boundaries. They push, they pull, they withdraw, and they observe your reaction. Most people fail these tests because they react emotionally instead of strategically. But the man who understands power responds differently. When someone pulls away, he does not panic. When someone acts distant, he does not beg for attention. When someone tries to provoke insecurity, he remains calm and grounded. And because his reactions are not predictable, the other person begins to reconsider how they approach him. Let me tell you something most people never realize until it is too late. The world is constantly studying you, not through words, but through patterns. People observe how you respond to pressure. They observe how you react when your value is challenged. They observe whether your confidence collapses the moment someone withdraws approval. If your emotional state depends on how others treat you, they quickly discover that weakness. But when your emotional center remains stable regardless of their behavior, you become extremely difficult to manipulate. And manipulation always seeks the easiest target. When people realize they cannot easily influence your emotions, they start treating you differently. Not necessarily because they suddenly become kinder, but because they understand that their usual tactics no longer work. Machiavelli once wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Now this idea is often misunderstood. He was not encouraging cruelty. What he understood was that respect is often rooted in consequences. People treat you according to the boundaries they believe you will enforce, and unpredictability reinforces those boundaries. If someone believes you will always tolerate their behavior, they will continue pushing the limits. But if they sense that your reaction could be calm detachment, quiet withdrawal, or even complete disappearance, they begin to behave differently. Your unpredictability introduces consequences without needing confrontation. You do not threaten. You do not argue. You simply become a person who cannot be easily controlled. And that alone reshapes the dynamic. Now pause for a moment and reflect on this question. How many times in your life have people assumed they knew exactly how you would react? How many times did someone feel comfortable ignoring your value because they believed you would always return? This is the trap of predictability. When people believe your loyalty has no boundaries, they stop respecting the relationship. But when they realize your presence is a choice, not a guarantee, they begin to treat it differently. So I want you to write something powerful in the comments right now. Type this phrase: "My calm makes me unpredictable." Because calmness combined with unpredictability is one of the most powerful psychological combinations a man can possess. Emotional men are easy to control. Reactive men are easy to manipulate. But a calm man who cannot be easily predicted becomes extremely difficult to influence. And this brings us to another uncomfortable truth. Many people will only respect you once they realize you are willing to walk away without drama. Not because you are angry, not because you are trying to prove something, but because your self-respect does not allow you to remain where you are undervalued. Walking away calmly is one of the most powerful messages you can send. It communicates confidence without arrogance. It communicates strength without aggression. And most importantly, it communicates independence. Independence is dangerous to anyone who depends on controlling you. The moment people realize you cannot be emotionally cornered, they begin to reconsider how they interact with you. Because manipulation requires predictable reactions. When those reactions disappear, the manipulation collapses. But there is another layer to this strategy that very few people understand. Unpredictability must be supported by internal discipline. You cannot simply pretend to be calm while your mind is consumed with insecurity. The power comes from genuine emotional control. You must build a mindset where your sense of worth is not tied to someone else's attention. That level of self-control takes time to develop. It requires reflection. It requires discipline. And sometimes it requires walking through uncomfortable situations where you resist the urge to chase validation. But once you develop that discipline, something incredible begins to happen. You stop fearing rejection. You stop fearing distance. You stop fearing the possibility of losing someone who does not value you. And when fear disappears, power emerges. Because fear is the invisible chain that keeps people trapped in unhealthy dynamics. The moment you realize that your life continues perfectly fine without someone's approval, you become free. And freedom is the foundation of real power. Before we continue to the next section, I want you to anchor this mindset with another phrase. Go to the comments and write, "I do not chase respect." Let those words become part of your identity. Because once you stop chasing respect, you start commanding it through your behavior. In the next section, we will uncover something even deeper, something that changes how people perceive your value entirely. Because sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to raise your standards so high that the wrong people remove themselves from your life. Number 3, raise your standards and watch who disappears. Once you stop chasing attention and start mastering silence and unpredictability, something else begins to change inside you. Your standards rise. And this is where the real transformation begins. Because the moment you raise your standards, the entire structure of your relationships starts to shift. Suddenly, the people who once treated you casually begin to feel uncomfortable around you. Not because you became arrogant, but because you stopped tolerating behavior that once seemed normal. Most people spend their lives lowering their standards to keep others comfortable. They tolerate disrespect. They accept inconsistent behavior. They allow people to come and go from their lives without consequence. And slowly, without realizing it, they train others to treat them as something easily replaceable. Machiavelli understood a brutal truth about human nature. People rarely respect what comes without resistance. When access to you requires no effort, no discipline, and no respect, your presence becomes ordinary. But when your standards rise, the entire dynamic changes. Now, attention to you requires consistency. Respect becomes a requirement instead of a request. And the people who once enjoyed the comfort of your unconditional tolerance begin to feel the pressure of your new boundaries. This is the moment where weak relationships begin to disappear. At first, this can feel unsettling. You may notice that some people start pulling away. Conversations become shorter. Invitations become less frequent. The same individuals who once enjoyed your energy suddenly seem distant. But understand this clearly. When you raise your standards, you are not losing people. You are revealing them. People who were only comfortable with the version of you that tolerated everything will naturally distance themselves from the version of you that expects respect. And that is not a loss. That is clarity. One of the most powerful shifts a man can experience is realizing that not everyone deserves access to his time, attention, and emotional energy. Machiavelli often emphasized the importance of understanding human motives. Not everyone around you is there because they value you. Some are there because they benefit from your presence. Others remain because your tolerance makes their behavior easy. But the moment you introduce standards, the game changes. Standards create a filter. They separate those who genuinely respect you from those who only enjoyed the convenience of your attention. And this filter becomes stronger the more emotionally disciplined you become. Here is something most people never realize. When you begin enforcing your standards calmly and without explanation, people begin to take you far more seriously. You no longer negotiate your boundaries. You simply live by them. You do not argue about respect. You expect it. You do not chase loyalty. You observe it. You do not beg people to value you. You allow their behavior to reveal whether they deserve a place in your life. This mindset creates a quiet authority around you. Others begin to sense that you are not easily influenced by emotional pressure. You are not desperate for approval. And you are not willing to lower your standards simply to keep someone around. That quiet authority is something many people have never encountered before. And because it is rare, it commands attention. Now listen carefully, because this is where Machiavellian wisdom becomes extremely relevant. Machiavelli believed that leaders must maintain a certain distance to preserve their authority. If a leader becomes too accessible, too predictable, and too eager to please everyone, their authority dissolves. The same principle applies to personal power. When your presence is constantly available, it loses value. But when access to you requires respect, discipline, and consistency, your presence becomes something people must earn. Scarcity creates value. This does not mean becoming cold or cruel. It simply means understanding that your time, your energy, and your emotional investment are valuable resources. And valuable resources should never be distributed without discernment. The moment you internalize this idea, your perspective changes dramatically. Instead of asking, "Why don't they value me?" you begin asking a far more powerful question: have they earned my attention? That shift alone changes everything, because now you are no longer trying to convince others to see your worth. Instead, you are calmly evaluating whether they deserve access to it. And this mindset produces an interesting psychological effect. People begin to respect what they must earn. When they realize that your attention is not automatic, they begin to value it more. When they understand that your time is not easily available, they begin to treat it with greater care. But more importantly, you begin to respect yourself more. Self-respect grows every time you enforce a boundary without apology. Self-respect grows every time you walk away from behavior that does not align with your standards. Self-respect grows every time you choose dignity over temporary validation. And once self-respect becomes part of your identity, something powerful happens. You stop tolerating environments that diminish your value. This is where many people struggle, because raising standards sometimes means losing familiarity. Relationships that once felt comfortable may no longer fit the person you are becoming. But growth often requires leaving behind dynamics that no longer align with your evolution. Machiavelli understood that power requires difficult decisions. Sometimes the strongest move is not confrontation, but quiet separation. You do not need dramatic arguments. You do not need emotional explanations. You simply stop investing energy where it is not reciprocated. And when you do this consistently, your entire environment begins to change. You start attracting people who respect your boundaries, people who appreciate your discipline, people who understand that your presence is not something to be taken lightly. But let me be very clear about something important. Raising your standards is not about demanding perfection from others. It is about refusing to tolerate disrespect from anyone, including yourself. Many people allow others to treat them poorly because they secretly doubt their own worth. They believe they must accept whatever attention they can get. But a man who understands his value does not think this way. He knows that respect begins internally. If you tolerate disrespect, you teach others that it is acceptable. If you enforce boundaries calmly, you teach others that your dignity is non-negotiable. And once people learn that lesson, they begin approaching you differently. Now pause for a moment and reflect on this truth. Every person in your life is there because your standards allowed them to stay. That idea may feel uncomfortable at first, but it is incredibly empowering, because it means that by changing your standards, you can change your environment. You can decide who deserves access to your attention. You can decide which relationships align with your values. You can decide what level of respect you require from those around you. And when you make those decisions with clarity and discipline, the wrong people will naturally remove themselves, not because you forced them to leave, but because your standards made their behavior incompatible with your life. Before we move to the next section, I want you to anchor this mindset with another powerful statement. Go to the comments and write, "My standards protect my power." Let those words become a reminder that your dignity is not negotiable. Because the moment you raise your standards and enforce them without hesitation, people begin to see you differently. Your presence carries more weight. Your silence carries more meaning. And your attention becomes something rare. But we are not finished yet. In the next section, we will explore something even more powerful than silence, unpredictability, or high standards. We will talk about emotional detachment. Because the moment you become emotionally independent, you become nearly impossible to control. Number 4. Emotional detachment, the ultimate form of power. There is a level of power that very few men ever reach. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It does not rely on intimidation, arguments, or proving a point. It is quiet, controlled, and almost invisible to those who do not understand it. This power is called emotional detachment. Now, understand something immediately. Emotional detachment does not mean you become cold, heartless, or incapable of connection. That is a misunderstanding. True emotional detachment means your inner stability is no longer controlled by how others treat you. It means your confidence does not rise or fall based on someone's attention, approval, or validation. When you reach this level of independence, you begin operating from a completely different psychological position than most people. Most individuals live in emotional dependency without realizing it. Their mood changes based on a message they receive or don't receive. Their sense of value shifts depending on how someone responds to them. Their confidence is built on reactions from others instead of a foundation within themselves. And this makes them extremely easy to influence. Because the person who controls your emotions controls you. Machiavelli understood that power often comes from emotional discipline. Leaders who allow their emotions to be manipulated become weak in the eyes of others. But those who remain composed under pressure create an aura of authority. They appear stable, deliberate, and difficult to influence. The same principle applies to your personal life. When someone realizes they can easily affect your emotional state, they begin to hold power over you. It might not even be intentional. Human beings naturally test the emotional reactions of those around them. They pull back slightly and observe what happens. They ignore you for a moment and watch how you respond. They delay communication and see whether you become anxious. Every reaction teaches them something about your emotional structure. If they see panic, they see dependency. If they see frustration, they see vulnerability. But if they see calm detachment, they see strength. This is why emotional detachment is so powerful. It removes the emotional leverage that others may unknowingly hold over you. When someone senses that your peace of mind does not depend on their behavior, they lose the ability to manipulate your reactions. Imagine someone trying to provoke you, expecting an emotional response. They expect anger, they expect pleading, they expect explanations. But instead, you remain calm. Your tone stays steady. Your presence remains composed. Suddenly, the dynamic changes. The person who expected control finds themselves facing uncertainty instead. And uncertainty is uncomfortable. Because when people cannot influence your emotions, they begin to question their position in your life. This is not about playing games. It is about mastering your own internal world. Machiavelli believed that those who rule themselves are far more capable of influencing the world around them. Self-mastery always precedes external power. When you detach emotionally, you begin to observe people more clearly. Instead of reacting immediately, you start watching patterns. You notice who respects your boundaries and who tests them. You notice who values your presence and who takes it for granted. And this awareness changes how you respond. You stop chasing clarity from people who provide confusion. You stop seeking validation from those who rarely give it. You stop investing energy into dynamics that consistently drain your focus. Instead, you conserve your emotional energy for what truly deserves it: your mission, your growth, your peace of mind. This is where many men experience a profound shift in their lives. The moment emotional detachment develops, you stop fearing rejection. Rejection no longer feels like a personal attack. It becomes information. It simply reveals compatibility, priorities, and character. When someone distances themselves, you do not panic. You observe. When someone disrespects your boundaries, you do not argue. You adjust. When someone stops valuing your presence, you do not beg. You step back. This calm response communicates something powerful without words. It communicates self-respect, and self-respect is extremely difficult for others to challenge. People often treat you according to the emotional signals you project. If your behavior shows desperation for approval, others sense that vulnerability. But if your behavior shows calm independence, others recognize that manipulating you will be difficult. Now, here is something most people do not expect. Emotional detachment actually increases your attractiveness and influence. Why? Because people are naturally drawn to those who appear emotionally stable. Stability creates trust. Stability creates curiosity. Stability creates respect. When someone senses that you are grounded within yourself, they begin to see you differently. Your words carry more weight. Your silence carries more meaning. Your presence becomes more impactful. This is why emotionally disciplined individuals often command attention without trying. Their behavior communicates confidence in a quiet, unmistakable way. But reaching this level requires practice. It requires resisting the urge to react impulsively. It requires observing situations instead of immediately responding to them. It requires building a mindset where your self-worth is not tied to anyone else's behavior. And that takes time. You will have moments where your emotions try to pull you back into old patterns. Moments where you feel the urge to explain yourself, defend yourself, or chase reassurance. But each time you choose calm detachment instead, your internal discipline grows stronger. Over time, something fascinating begins to happen. Situations that once disturbed you start feeling insignificant. People who once controlled your mood lose their influence, and the emotional independence you develop becomes one of your greatest strengths. Because when your emotional center is stable, your decisions become clearer. You stop acting from insecurity. You stop reacting from fear. Instead, you begin acting from purpose. And purpose creates direction. When a man has direction, he becomes difficult to distract. His focus shifts away from temporary validation and toward long-term growth. He invests his time into building his future instead of analyzing every interaction with others. This is the ultimate form of freedom. Freedom from emotional dependency. Freedom from constant validation. Freedom from the need to be understood by everyone. When you reach this level, people begin sensing something different about you. They cannot always explain it, but they feel it. Your calmness becomes noticeable. Your reactions become measured. Your attention becomes selective. And selective attention is powerful. Because attention is the currency of modern life. Everyone is competing for it. Everyone is trying to capture it. But the person who controls where their attention goes controls their life. And once you realize this, your perspective changes completely. You no longer give attention to situations that weaken you. You no longer give attention to people who disrespect you. You no longer give attention to emotional chaos that disrupts your focus. Instead, you direct your attention toward the things that strengthen your position, your goals, your discipline, your growth. Before we continue to the next section, I want you to anchor this mindset with another phrase. Go to the comments and type, "My emotions are under my control." Because that statement represents the foundation of personal power. Once you truly control your emotional responses, you become extremely difficult to manipulate. And when manipulation disappears, respect often takes its place. Number 5. The power of scarcity, when your presence becomes rare. There is a principle that governs nearly every form of value in the world, whether people realize it or not. The principle is simple, but its power is enormous. Scarcity creates value. When something is always available, it becomes ordinary. When something is rare, it becomes important. This rule applies to money, to resources, to opportunities, and most importantly, to human attention. Most people destroy their own value because they make their presence too easy to access. They are always available, always responding immediately, always ready to give their time, their energy, their focus. And because their presence is constant, people slowly begin to take it for granted. It becomes background noise in the lives of others. Machiavelli understood that influence often comes from controlling access. Leaders who are always accessible eventually lose authority because familiarity removes the sense of importance. But those who manage their presence carefully create an atmosphere of significance around them. Their time becomes valuable because it is not endlessly available. The same principle applies to you. If you give your attention freely to everyone, people will unconsciously begin to treat it as something ordinary. But if your attention becomes selective, measured, intentional, people begin to perceive it differently. Suddenly, your presence carries weight. Think about it carefully. When someone rarely speaks, people listen more closely when they finally do. When someone is not constantly around, their presence becomes noticeable the moment they appear. When someone does not constantly give validation, their approval becomes far more meaningful. Scarcity changes perception. This is why people who constantly seek attention often struggle to gain respect. The more they demand recognition, the less powerful their presence becomes. But those who focus on their purpose and appear only when necessary develop a natural gravity that draws attention without effort. Machiavellian strategy understands this perfectly. Power is not only about what you do, it is about how often you appear and how you distribute your presence. If you are everywhere, you become invisible. If you are rare, you become memorable. And here is where many people misunderstand the idea of scarcity. They believe it means ignoring others or pretending to be busy. That is not the point. Scarcity is not an act. It is a consequence of living a life focused on purpose. When your life has direction, your time becomes limited. You are building something. You are improving yourself. You are investing energy into goals that require focus and discipline. Because of this, you cannot afford to distribute your attention endlessly. Your presence becomes selective because your priorities are clear. And people notice this immediately. They notice that you are not always available for every conversation. They notice that your attention is directed toward things that matter. They notice that when you engage with someone, it is intentional rather than automatic. This creates an interesting psychological effect. People begin to respect your time because they sense that it is valuable. The man who appears busy chasing validation seems weak, but the man who appears focused on his mission seems powerful. Focus communicates purpose. Purpose communicates strength, and strength commands attention. This is why individuals who are deeply invested in their growth often become more respected over time. Their presence becomes associated with discipline, direction, and control. People sense that their time is valuable, and they treat it accordingly. But there is another layer to scarcity that most people overlook. Scarcity does not only apply to your time, it applies to your emotional energy. Many individuals distribute their emotional attention freely. They invest deep emotional reactions into every small situation. They allow minor conflicts to consume their thoughts. They respond to every criticism, every comment, every misunderstanding. This drains their psychological energy. But a disciplined mind chooses carefully where emotional energy is spent. Not every situation deserves your reaction. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every criticism deserves your response. When you begin practicing this form of restraint, your emotional presence becomes rare as well. People notice that you do not react to everything. You do not engage in unnecessary conflict. You do not allow trivial matters to disturb your composure. And that calm restraint creates a powerful impression, because emotional stability is rare. In a world where most people react instantly to every stimulus, the person who remains composed appears different. They appear thoughtful, they appear disciplined, they appear strong. Scarcity of reaction creates impact. When you rarely react emotionally, the moments when you do speak carry far more weight. People pay attention because they know you do not speak carelessly. Machiavelli believed that those who speak less are often heard more carefully. Silence forces others to observe you more closely. They begin interpreting your behavior. They become curious about your thoughts. Silence creates psychological gravity, and gravity attracts attention. This is why powerful individuals often appear calm and measured. They understand that their words and actions should not be scattered randomly. Every decision, every statement, every reaction is intentional. The less frequently you react, the more powerful your reactions become. Now consider what happens when you combine everything we have discussed so far. Silence, strategic absence, unpredictability, high standards, emotional detachment, scarcity of attention. When these elements come together, something extraordinary begins to happen. Your presence becomes noticeable. People start feeling the difference between when you are present and when you are not. Your energy becomes distinctive. Your attention becomes valuable. And your reactions become meaningful. You no longer need to demand respect. Your behavior naturally commands it. And here is the most important part of this transformation. You are not doing these things to manipulate others. You are doing them to protect your own peace and dignity. Respect from others is simply a consequence. When your life is structured around discipline, purpose, and self-respect, people begin to recognize those qualities. They may not always understand why you seem different, but they will feel it. They will sense that you are not easily influenced. They will sense that your attention is selective. They will sense that your presence is valuable. Before we move to the next section, I want you to reinforce this idea in your mind. Go to the comments and type this phrase: "My presence is rare." Because once you begin treating your time, your energy, and your attention as valuable resources, the world will start treating them the same way. And remember, value is rarely created through constant availability. Value is created through discipline and scarcity. Number 6. When they try to pull you back. The moment you begin changing your behavior, when you stop chasing attention, when your presence becomes rare, when your emotional reactions become controlled, something predictable begins to happen. The people who were once comfortable with the old version of you will start trying to pull you back. This is one of the most important psychological moments in the entire transformation. Because when someone realizes they can no longer influence you the way they used to, their first instinct is often to test your discipline. They may suddenly show more attention. They may send unexpected messages. They may behave warmly again after a period of distance. Sometimes they will even act as if nothing ever changed. At first glance, it may feel like things are improving. But what is really happening is a test. The moment your value increases, people instinctively try to regain the influence they once had over you. Human psychology is deeply connected to control and familiarity. When someone becomes accustomed to a certain dynamic with you, when they know you will chase, respond immediately, or tolerate inconsistency, they grow comfortable with that structure. The moment that structure changes, they begin looking for ways to restore it. This does not always come from malicious intentions. Often it is subconscious. People simply try to return to the emotional pattern that once gave them security. But this is the exact moment where most men lose all the progress they have made. The moment the other person begins showing attention again, they rush back into the old dynamic. They respond instantly. They flood the person with energy. They try to rebuild the connection exactly as it was before. And without realizing it, they teach the other person a powerful lesson. If you pull away slightly, I will chase you again. This is why discipline is everything. When someone begins showing attention again, the powerful response is not excitement or desperation. The powerful response is calm consistency. You remain respectful. You remain composed. But you do not abandon the standards you have built. Your attention does not suddenly become unlimited again. Your time does not become endlessly available. Your emotional state does not shift dramatically because someone has decided to give you a moment of validation. Instead, you observe. You watch their behavior carefully. Are they consistent now? Are they respectful of your time? Do their actions align with their words? Or are they simply testing whether you will fall back into the old pattern? Machiavelli believed that wise individuals study behavior more than promises. Words are easy to offer, but behavior reveals true intention. When someone tries to pull you back into the old dynamic, the strongest move you can make is patience. You allow their actions over time to reveal whether anything has truly changed. This patience communicates something extremely powerful. It shows that your emotional independence is genuine. It shows that your standards are not temporary reactions, but permanent principles. And when people realize that your behavior is not easily influenced by short bursts of attention, they begin to understand that the dynamic has permanently changed. Now, here is where the psychology becomes fascinating. When someone cannot easily regain control of your attention, their perception of you shifts. They begin to see you differently than they did before. The person who once appeared predictable now seems disciplined. The person who once seemed emotionally accessible now appears selective. And the person who once chased validation now appears confident and self-directed. This shift in perception is the foundation of respect. Respect rarely comes from what you say about yourself. It comes from what your behavior communicates consistently over time. And consistent behavior is difficult to fake. Many people can pretend to be disciplined for a short period of time. They can act calm for a few days. They can withdraw temporarily in an attempt to appear mysterious. But eventually, their old habits return. They start chasing again. They start explaining again. They start seeking validation again. But when your discipline is genuine, your behavior remains steady. You do not overreact to small changes. You do not rush to re-establish emotional closeness. You do not allow temporary attention to weaken your standards. Instead, you maintain your composure and allow time to reveal the truth of the situation. This level of emotional control is extremely rare. Most people operate on impulse. They react quickly to every emotional stimulus. They feel excitement, fear, hope, or anxiety, and immediately act on those feelings. But the man who understands Machiavellian discipline learns to pause between emotion and action. That pause is where power exists. In that pause, you observe, you analyze, you decide. And because your reactions are deliberate rather than impulsive, people begin to treat you with greater caution. They recognize that you are not easily influenced by temporary emotional shifts. Now, here is something very important to understand. Sometimes when you stop chasing and start enforcing standards, people will not try to pull you back at all. Instead, they will simply disappear from your life. And many individuals interpret this as failure. They think the strategy did not work. They think they lost the person entirely. But this is not failure. This is clarity. If someone disappears the moment you stop providing unlimited attention, it reveals that the connection was never built on genuine respect. It was built on convenience. The person valued the benefits of your attention, but they were not willing to respect the boundaries that came with it. And when that kind of relationship ends, you have not lost anything meaningful. You have simply removed an imbalance from your life. Machiavelli understood that power often requires difficult separations. Not every alliance is worth maintaining. Some connections weaken your position rather than strengthen it. And wisdom lies in recognizing the difference. When someone leaves because you raised your standards, they are not rejecting your value. They are revealing their inability to meet it. This perspective is incredibly liberating. Instead of chasing people who withdraw, you allow their actions to reveal their priorities. Instead of trying to convince others to respect you, you simply maintain your standards and observe who naturally aligns with them. Over time, this process filters your environment. People who respect discipline remain. People who value consistency remain. People who appreciate emotional maturity remain. And the rest remove themselves. Your social circle becomes smaller, but stronger. Your relationships become fewer, but deeper. And your life becomes more peaceful. Because peace is the natural result of boundaries. Without boundaries, chaos enters every relationship. Expectations become unclear. Respect becomes inconsistent. Emotional energy becomes scattered across countless situations that do not deserve your attention. But when your standards are clear and your behavior is consistent, the chaos begins to disappear. People either adapt to your boundaries or they leave. Both outcomes benefit you. This is the quiet strength of Machiavellian discipline. It is not about controlling others. It is about controlling yourself so effectively that others must adapt to your standards if they wish to remain in your life. Now pause for a moment and reflect on how powerful that is. You are no longer trying to win people's approval. You are simply living according to your principles and observing who respects them. That shift transforms the entire dynamic of your relationships, because the moment people realize you are not trying to impress them, they begin to see you differently. Confidence without validation is rare. Emotional independence is rare. And rare qualities naturally attract attention. Before we move into the next section, I want you to reinforce this mindset. Go to the comments and type this phrase: "My discipline cannot be manipulated." Let that statement become a reminder that your strength lies not in convincing others of your value, but in behaving in a way that naturally commands respect. Because the next stage of this transformation goes even deeper. Once people realize they cannot easily pull you back into old patterns, something fascinating begins to happen. They begin to wonder about you. They begin to question how you changed. They begin to study your behavior the same way you once studied theirs. And that curiosity introduces a new dynamic, one that Machiavelli understood better than almost anyone in history. The dynamic of psychological intrigue. Number 7. The moment they realize they lost control. There comes a moment in every power shift when the other person finally understands something has changed. Not on the surface, not through words, but deep inside the dynamic that once existed between you. It is the moment they realize they no longer control your emotional reactions. They no longer influence your attention the way they once did. And perhaps, most importantly, they realize you are no longer chasing them. This realization rarely happens instantly. At first, they assume you are just busy. Then they assume you will eventually return to the old pattern. They expect the familiar version of you to reappear, the one who explains, who reaches out, who tries to restore the connection. But when that moment never arrives, something begins to shift inside their mind. They start noticing your absence differently. The silence that once seemed temporary now feels intentional. The distance that once seemed like a phase now feels permanent. And slowly, they begin asking themselves a question they never asked before. What changed about him? This is the psychological turning point. Because the moment someone realizes they cannot easily influence you anymore, their perception of your value transforms. The attention they once ignored suddenly feels meaningful. The presence they once took for granted suddenly feels rare. The man they once believed would always be there suddenly appears independent. And independence is powerful, not because it forces someone to chase you, but because it reveals that your life does not depend on their presence. Your peace remains intact. Your direction remains clear. Your confidence remains